Right. Rory, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Rory Sutherland. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Ogilvy Group in the UK and President of the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, which, for those who don't know it, is kind of the British equivalent of the 4As.
Okay. You've just talked here in Estonia, and you talked especially about the context and luxury brand, and I found this very interesting. Can you just explain a bit?
Do you mean particularly about context?
Yeah.
The fact is that we have a model of how advertising works, which has determined pretty much everything from the messages we create to the way we research their effect and to the model of persuasion we've developed, which is really designed for television.
Right.
Now, the whole point of television, at least in theory, is that if you don't remember it, it doesn't have any effect. I don't think this is necessarily true, by the way, but the research model assumes that. And so television is researched as what you call an out-of-context communication. It's a communication that takes place at some distance from the point of decision. What I think behavioural economics reveals, and actually quite a lot of other behavioural science reveals, is that there's an awful lot of human decision, which is also very, very heavily influenced, very close to the point of decision, by context, comparison, choice architecture, settings, things such as, for example, path dependency of your decision. And there's an enormous influence, I think, to the failure to sell frozen food is simply the fact that in the UK, fresh ready meals come earlier in the supermarket than frozen ones do. I mean, things literally as simple as that. We're also enormously influenced by cues such as, which are what you might call social cues. So things which appear to sell a lot because there's a lot of it on the shelf, we will automatically be much more likely to buy than things that are standing, on their own that look not much in great demand. Similarly, in choosing a restaurant, we'll always tend to choose one that's got 20 people in it rather than one that's got 3. Again, it's a form of social proof. What's interesting about these things is, one, they tend to influence us fairly close to the moment of decision, which means that they don't show up in conventional market research. And the second thing is, we're often influenced by them completely subconsciously. So we aren't even aware of that decision to choose restaurant A over restaurant B because there are 27 people in it rather than 7. We just do it instinctively, which also means it doesn't show up in research. So what's happening is that marketers have developed a system of consumer understanding which is actually blind to the most important influences on consumer behavior.
And the example of luxury brands and the T-shirt that you gave, like both on prices and on the offer, was very interesting.
One of the interesting things is a thing called the framing effect, which is that we don't have an absolute measure of price or value.
Right.
We experience sort of guilt and unease paying for things according to what we think we should be paying for it, not according to how much it costs.
Right.
So weirdly, if you think about it, sometimes you or I might feel slightly guilty about spending £30 on a meal, but actually we don't experience all that much more guilt and unease when we spend £300,000 or £600,000 buying a house. What actually happens is that the way we appreciate price and value is very, very relativistic. So essentially, we have a sort of mental price frame in our heads, which may be set by actually completely arbitrary numbers we've just been exposed to. There are experiments that show if you just get people to read out their telephone number and then estimate the price for something, just the very act of estimating your telephone number means people with higher telephone numbers tend to estimate a higher price or value for something. But it also applies to the fact that if you spend 20 minutes in a luxury goods store with lots of items that cost £300 or £400, it's a lot easier to spend £40 on a T-shirt than it is if you've just been, going around a cheap shop where everything costs 20 quid.
And the way they are also put in the shop does affect the price.
One of the great it's almost one of the biblical experiments of behavioural economics, or it may have been a discovery rather than an experiment, but I think there were rice cookers in the American upmarket retailer called Williams of Sonoma, I think it was. And they had 2 of them. They had a $100 rice cooker and a $250 rice cooker. And they sold a few of each of them, but nothing particularly exciting. And then they introduced a $500 rice cooker. Now, they sold a few of those, but what they really noticed was that the sales of the $250 rice cooker really started to take off. Because suddenly, when it's sitting next to a $500 rice cooker, a $240 one actually looks quite reasonable.
Sure.
The truth of the matter is we don't really know what we should be paying for anything. We don't have a numerical measure, at least not yet, of sort of human happiness, worth, value, utility. And so we, in truth, often look for external cues as to what we should be paying. One of those common heuristics we adopt is, choose, when faced with three options, choose the one somewhere in the middle. Don't buy the cheapest, don't buy the most expensive, for instance. But I mean, one of the experiences I think Rolls-Royce Motors found was that it was easier to sell Rolls-Royce cars at yacht shows and plane shows than at car shows. Next to another load of cars at £90,000, £200,000, a £320,000 car seems expensive. Next to a Learjet, it's almost become a kind of casual purchase.
Okay, thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thanks.